To the Hangout, the first Hangout in a series of 8 with wellness expert Jason Fulston. So welcome along everybody here tonight, or if you're over the other side of the world, it may not be nighttime, it might be in the middle of the day, it might be in the morning, but welcome wherever you are. Jason, thank you so much for doing this series of Hangouts, because the information I know personally, the information that you're going to share is going to be completely, absolutely invaluable, and the tips and wisdom and knowledge that you have in that area of health and wellness is second to none. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Em. It's a privilege to finally share my story with as many people as I can, and I want to be able to actually impact people's lives in a positive way in a very, very short time. It's taken me 28 years of accumulating knowledge that, yeah, it's done me a lot of good, but now I want to do a lot of people a lot of good. So looking forward to this 8 weeks of just sharing and empowering people. It's going to be great.
How generous is that? I love it. I absolutely adore that you not only have gone to the effort of finding out the information that you know, but that you want to pay it forward and help as many people achieve the same results that you have, and I think that's incredible. So again, thank you so much. And you have been causing quite a storm down in Adelaide with your one-day events that people can go to and learn from you for an entire day. But it's just awesome that we can do this 8-part series and be able to cover off a different topic every single time.
Yeah, it's going to be, I want to take people on a journey really through from food production, which has been my expertise for a long, long time in producing organic food. So I want to give people a snapshot at food production and why I call it their toxic supply. It's disconcerting as to what is actually going on in the food industry. And average consumer has absolutely no idea of the amount of additives that go in at the farm. So it's not about processed foods and additives, that's another problem, but I want to take people one step further back so they get a real understanding, and then we can lead them through getting a handle on how they can take control of that, and just real basic, simple things, and it doesn't need to be hard.
So ultimately, sorry to cut you off there, we are going back to a grassroots level, excuse the pun, but really that's what we are going to do in this series, start from where it all begins and all the way through to what you can do at the other end, you know, as a result, you know, to perhaps look at curing or fixing some of the problems that are caused from the issues way back at the beginning here. So why do you call it, why do you call food a toxic supply? Where does that come from?
Well, I've seen, just in my brief time in farming, things gear up and change so fast on mass production, and just on basic things that are, well, take wheat for example. I'm not going to pick on wheat farmers, but I was a wheat farmer, traditional kind of conventional wheat farmer, so it's a real easy example. Wheat obviously becomes your flour, which becomes your bread eventually. The way wheat is grown now, in comparison to the way it was grown even when I started out in farming, which was in the 80s, is massively different. When my father set out growing wheat, which was, you know, in the 60s, it was massively different. You know, just in that from the 1960s till now, just totally poles apart from production level. If you take, for example, when my father grew his first crop of wheat after clearing some native bushland that was mallee, it grew a crop of wheat with virtually no inputs, minimal fertilizer. It was only just new around. Fertilizer was a new thing in the 60s. What did they do before that? So,
well, that's what I was just about to ask you. You know, what did they do before fertilizer? And I guess, you know, your common sense would tell you that the nutrients came from the soil.
That's correct. Yeah, nutrients. The soil is very rich in nutrient. It's very heavily populated with microflora, bacteria, fungi, and all of those things feed a plant. They assist the plant to feed, and they work symbiotically with the root system and bring nutrients up to the plant that's out of reach even. So the plant has reach for nutrient way beyond its own root structure. So before fertilizers were introduced, I guess natural composts and just manures and just the process of leaving soil rest. You know, high production farming now has no time for rest. They're multiplying like the amount of crops they can push into one season. I know a lot of the regions here in South Australia only allow one crop per season because of dry land farming, and that's where I come from. So one crop per season, but the necessity of high production because of the high input costs has driven it like a it's a treadmill that when you get on production system of more and more inputs needed to try and produce more of the commodity, farmers are detached from wheat being food, becoming food. Wheat is the primary source of all of our bread, and farmers themselves are eating that grain they grow within a few months. So what has happened though, from my father growing those crops with very little input and growing a reasonable yield, like the amount of tonnage per hectare, with virtually no input, to now just a standard crop of wheat would have 4 to 6 applications of some kind of herbicide to control weeds.
Wow. Yuck.
Yuck, yeah. The weeds are being fed by the fertilizer that's pushed under it. If you stop fertilizing in the kind of way they are now, you actually have less weeds. I proved it on my organic farm. In a very short period of time, the energy of the soil reverts back. You actually produce better quality. And yes, you might lose quantity, but the quality far exceeds the quality of something that's been force-fed with artificial fertilizers.
So I've got 2 questions already. One being quality over quantity, of course, any day. But how does, when we're an ever-growing population that has this demand, you know, and an instant gratification mentality for food, how can we sustain quality when we need to produce quantity? What's your take on that?
There's, from what I saw on my own property, and I'm talking about a 6,000 acre property, so over 2,500 hectares. We converted that to organic after, you know, it came from an organic farm. Sort of, my grandfather was an organic farmer. He didn't know any different. My father then sort of followed the tradition of what was happening at the time. And then I took it back to the grassroots organic. What we saw happen was the actual tonnage of produce go up over a period of 4 to 6 years. We were growing less grain because we weren't targeting grain anymore, but the weight of the grain went up. The weight of our livestock increased incredibly. The amount of livestock per hectare was 2.5 times what it was previously.
Wow.
So the actual ability to feed the world nutrient-rich, high-density food cannot be done using systems and the way they're doing food right now. So
No,
I believe
yeah, sorry.
step back and rebuild soil and put more nutrient into the food and actually feeds more people. You need less of it. We're starving, though.
Well, yeah, I was just about to say that. You know, it's the case when you eat decent food, you're not as hungry, because if you eat garbage, you not only crave more garbage, but you know it's normally a simple, you know, if you eat a simple sugar or a simple carbohydrate, something that's you know, en masse, you're really hungry probably an hour afterwards, whereas if you eat quality food, it'll actually sustain you for a longer period of time. So what you're saying makes so much sense.
Yeah, I think it's very obvious now to me when I see the farmer is chasing a commodity increase, so he's trying to grow more wheat. I'm still picking on wheat farmer. He's trying to grow more of that commodity so he can get paid more, but the cost that he's putting in to chase that extra tonnage, extra production, the cost is outweighing the benefit, and it's creating this toxic supply of food. It's no different feeding a plant this artificial water-based, water-soluble fertilizer. It's no different from feeding your body just sugar, sugar, sugar.
Mm.
It
Well, you said
creates
something. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that you said something before about weeds, and that the fertilizer actually stimulates the weed growth. But the irony is that weeds typically, aren't they the highest nutrient-rich food a lot of the time that you can get your hands on, because it does steal all the nutrients from the soil.
Absolutely. The weeds are nature's way of fixing an imbalance. So it doesn't matter what weed is there, it's showing you it's a symptom of something under the soil. There's an imbalance. And as that weed lives and dies in its cycle, it will bring nutrient availability back for other plants. So if you leave weeds actually grow, seed and grow, they eventually replace or replenish that soil completely.
That's incredible. The earth just, you know.
Yeah, I saw it happen in my 6,000 acre property over, you know, less than 6-7 years. The weeds that were there grew really high populations, high densities for a short period of time, and it kind of it fixed the problem. So we had less of them, and all of a sudden we see this natural balance come back into pastures. The livestock do better without having to control it with some kind of herbicide. So
that's so full on, you know. Mother Nature corrects itself. It knows how to fix itself. We just have to let it.
That's it. We need to kind of just let go of control. Farmers have become control freaks. They think they can just take one container of this, container of that, and put it all on this commodity that is then becoming your food. So as we let go of this control mentality, nature brings things back into balance. We can assist that, and that's what I was working on really, really intensely, is assisting nature to enhance the balance faster, using minerals, using biological activators which activate the soil, bring the nutrient availability back. So then the food density is massively different. It tastes different.
Yes, I agree. I agree that homegrown food tastes so different to the stuff that you get, you know, especially the stuff that you get at a major food chain or a major supermarket chain. But yeah, it not only tastes different, it looks different as well, and you know, it's better for you, and you don't need as much. And I think a lot of people think, you know, I need to take a multivitamin to get the lack of vitamins that, you know, I'm not getting in my food. But it's actually more about the minerals, I would sort of hazard a guess to say.
Yeah, minerals are the building blocks of your enzyme system in your body that creates the vitamins from the food. The problem that we have, even from the food supply that we have currently, our mainstream food supply of fruit and vegetables is not only loaded with all this toxic input from herbicides, from insecticides, from the artificial fertilizer that's forcing it to grow. It's not only loaded with all that, it's nutrient depleted. It's bankrupt of nutrient. So in your body, it cannot then form the long chain amino acids, breakdown of proteins. It cannot form the enzymatic process that actually breaks the food down. So what happens then is your typical everyday food, fruit and veg, whatever it might be you think you're eating clean, it can't actually break itself down in your body because it lacks the very thing, the very enzyme structure that will break it down.
Right. It's so, really is just this vicious cycle of, we're eating garbage, but well, not garbage, but we're eating nutrient deficient food or depleted food, as you said. Yep. But then, we actually, that's the very thing that we need to correct the problems that is causing. So, either way, whichever way you look at it, it's just this vicious cycle. And, you can take supplements, but so many supplements out there on the market are all synthetic anyway. And, we just really need to, from what I'm hearing from you and what you're saying, is steer clear of the instant gratification and, just go back to having a little bit of patience, because that patience in the end is going to pay off. I mean, with the farmers and where the farmers are concerned, obviously they're under a lot of pressure, and they're under a lot of pressure to perform and produce, copious quantities of whatever it is that they're growing. But, it's to the detriment of the mass population. So when is it going to stop? When are we going to actually wake up and smell the coffee before it's too late, before we're this disease-ridden, nutrient-depleted world, society?
That is, the Western world is obviously gone that way faster than I guess you would call it the third world. However, they've protected or not screwed up their food supply as much as we have. And as far as changing and actually making change, the farmers need the incentive to make the change. At the moment, they're driven on this financial treadmill that is asking them to produce more, because consumers are still buying in a certain pattern that creates the need to produce more. We don't need to produce more wheat in the world. We actually eat way too much wheat as a nation. Or the Western world eats way too much corn and wheat. So we don't need to produce more. We've got surplus. Sorry, there's nearly we could do with half the wheat and half the corn and send it to countries that need it. So we need to get back into balance of what we actually put into our food. As then we process food, it becomes something different. We put in way too many inputs of things that are in everything: sugar, wheat, corn. It's in every single processed product you pick up.
Yes, and I think you knocked it on the head when you said balance, because we do need to get a balance back. I totally and utterly agree with that, because one of the things that just winds me up so much, knowing what I know about the food production and the behind the scenes and what you're covering off as well too, with the eating too much wheat and too much corn, and then it's also a derivative of those products that are in so many, like 99% of all the stuff that's on our supermarket shelf that's not fresh. So we have no fighting chance against any of the disorders or ailments or problems that are caused as a result of wheat, corn, gluten, you name it. And then all of a sudden, in the last 5 years, there's become this epidemic in our society of of gluten intolerance and diabetes, which, you know, diabetes has to do with insulin, which has to do with the way, you know, we essentially process our food. So it's just, I so much support what you're doing in the education of this side of food production, and trying to get the message out there to as many people as possible that let's go back to the cause rather than addressing the symptoms.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. We need to, and people, I think the awareness since this wave and epidemic of gluten intolerance and diabetes, it's become more of a accepted normal when people say they have allergies, and you know, it's rife in schools. Kids can't take nuts to school because some other kid is going to react to it. You know, it's the awareness has changed from 20 odd years ago when I was told I had allergies to food, and you know, I was really different. But what I've seen now, we're looking at the ingredients list of processed food. So people are going back then to go, okay, we'll go back to more whole food. We'll actually cook something from whole food instead of a packet. So that is happening. But what I want to take people is one step further than that, is to actually start asking for ingredients list from the farmer of what went into that food in production. Then we can fix the whole problem, because fixing the processed food is only part of it. Creating gluten-free foods that are made still with the toxic food supply isn't that. So that's why I'm going back to how food is produced. It's the underlying root cause of just about every illness known to man. And I know from my own experience what changing that input does to your body.
Well, yes, and I was going to ask you that question, because do you believe that there would be as much of a problem with gluten intolerance out there if the actual source of the gluten product, or the wheat, or the, you know, what have you, has the essential minerals that it's supposed to have, and is actually a whole food rather than a highly processed deficient food? Do you think that bodies would change to actually be able to more easily break down that product?
Absolutely, and I've proved that myself. I spent 10 years on a gluten-free diet trying to figure it out, because I was a celiac, told to never eat gluten again. And what I've figured out is the 17 basic minerals make up a grain of wheat. When it's produced like it is, it's deficient of more than half of them. They're in there.
Wow.
Right balance. So the actual protein, which is the gluten part of the wheat, is out of balance, and it becomes a toxin to the body, because it's got a whole lot. It's not only has it got the minerals, it's got some other things that have grown systemically in the plant. So it's got S7 poison in there from some kind of herbicide, and from the nitrate fertilizer that has created an imbalance in the proteins in that grain of wheat. That is why people end up not being able to break down a perfectly normal food. Take them to a perfectly grown grain of wheat, take them to something that's got nutrient in it, with the ability to create the enzyme release in your body, without the toxins, without the pesticides attached to the gluten. All of a sudden, your body actually knows what to do with it. The problem actually starts up is your body gets into a trigger-happy state, if you want to call it that. It reacts to gluten, whether it's clean or not clean. It sets up this reactive state, and that's how I was for a long time. Until
it learns a certain behaviour. Is that what you're saying? It learns to cope in a certain way, so it just continues to do that because you know, your chemical makeup, I guess, has changed, because it's a like a cellular learned behaviour type thing.
Absolutely, it becomes a cellular reaction to the substance. What I actually did was I took a series of treatments that changed that cellular response, and I was eating clean wheat, clean gluten, nutrient dense, and my body could cope with it. All of a sudden it was back on track, and not only overcome gluten intolerance, but a whole lot of other things doing, the learning process. So really.
So for those that don't know, clean food, when you refer to clean food, that's just in its purest form, grown with the minerals and nutrients that it needs to grow.
That's right, yeah. Clean food I would refer to as no added artificial fertilizer, no added pesticide in its growth cycle, no clean soil. And it's hard to find clean soil in the world today. Organic farms,
so
that have been organic for a long, long time have clean soil. When you convert to organic, it takes time, but you can rebalance the soil.
What does it take to rebalance soil? Because, we've for years taken from the soil, but what would it take to put back in the soil so that we can take from it again?
Yeah, it's really, you've got to look at what you are extracting when you harvest. So if it's fruit and veg, there's certain things that are a higher requirement, but technically you cannot extract the mineral from all the topsoil by producing plants or producing some kind of crop. It's got nearly an unlimited supply of action and interaction. Most of the growing happens through photosynthesis, so it's actually coming out of the atmosphere.
Okay.
At that time is actually drawing back into the soil. It's feeding the biota, which then brings up the mineral availability again. So the cycle can go on, and it has gone on for thousands and thousands of years without being depleted. But when you break down the cycle with toxins in the soil that kill off the things that are feeding our food supply, you have to do their job, and it's impossible. So you actually break that link that feeds the food, then that obviously breaks the link that feeds our bodies. So
well, if the answer is to go back to basics and to not continue down the path that we've been travelling down in terms of adding chemical substances to the soil, and we can possibly treat and or reverse so many of people's health problems out there just by changing diet and eating clean food. Well, then what's the answer immediately? What can people who are sitting at home watching this do or implement straight away to start this change, to start seeing results in their own life? Because obviously we can't rely on the big conglomerates to do it for us, because they're driven so much by the pressures of the financial side of things, and you do feel for them, but at the end of the day it's not a quick fix if you're going to rely on that. So what can we do? Because obviously we don't want to look at it as a dead end or as a no way out type scenario. Of course there is, which we were discussing earlier, but what would you suggest?
Well, I think the first and foremost thing to do is, and we'll cover this more in the next session, is find a affordable organic food supply. And I know that's a challenge, but there's a lot of organic markets springing up around the place. There's a lot of places where you can go and find.
Yes. Well, actually, somebody put on Facebook the other day, there was a farmer's market up in Sydney, and I want to find out who runs it, and I want to find out if there's one in Victoria, because literally, Jason, there was bags and bags and bags of fresh, beautiful, organic, locally grown produce, and it was all $1 a bag. So that's actually so much cheaper than actually going to your local supermarket and buying stuff that's no good for you. Instead, $1 a bag for big bags of kale and big bags of vegetables. It was incredible.
Well, the thing that you need to understand is food is actually free. It grows. It comes out of the atmosphere and out of the soil. And we put price on it because we can't all grow all of our own food. But when you just look at it from maybe a step back and go, well, I could grow just 2 or 3 herbs on my windowsill. Mm-hmm. If you've got a backyard, why does it have to grow lawn? It doesn't all have to grow lawn. And I look at parklands and that around Adelaide, for instance. there's so much wasted areas. There's no need for the homeless people to ever go hungry if we just turned some of our parklands into just food. It doesn't take any more care. It's really simple. Food is free. People could come and go, help themselves, and actually, community would join in and tend to those gardens as part of their daily life because they'd be getting fed from them. It's
what a
really
phenomenal concept. Can you imagine if you went to a parkland and there was 5 apple trees of different variety and a lemon tree and a mandarin tree? I mean, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just simple, and along, certain verges and that in parklands, if we just do, we can grow vegetables that look fancy, and why not? Have it so people will want to come and actually tend to it and harvest it and put more in and just keep the production thing happening. It can happen in our own backyards. Food can be free, and the farmer isn't looking for massive amounts of cash from something that didn't cost them a lot to grow. So if you find an organic farmer, the actual input costs over a period of time get less. Not initially. It costs a lot of money to get certified organic, and that's another story. We'll cover it next week.
We'll cover that in another topic.
I think find a clean food source, find a farming market, a community where you can actually ask the farmers what went on the food, what went into the production of it, and you'll find you're actually buying real food. You're buying at the right price because there's no one in between. It doesn't need to be 4 middle, dealers in the middle there that take up a massive profit that makes organic food hugely expensive on the shelf.
Well, that's right. It's all the middlemen.
Yeah, and that's what disempowers the farmer because then they get very little. They get no feedback from the customer. Then that's where farming has gone wrong over generations. They've got so detached from the end user, they're not answerable anymore.
The gratification.
Yeah, they need to connect. And when I talk to farmers about that, they go, we're not marketers. And I totally understand that. The farmer is out to produce food, not to market. But traditionally, farmers were marketers. They were market gardeners that just went to markets continually with whatever they could grow that season.
Well, yes, and they were proud of their produce, and they loved seeing the end result of people being satisfied from their food. Spit it out, Em. But yeah, there is something really rewarding about seeing someone enjoy something that you've grown. And I think the pressure that, you touched on it before with the middleman, they are under so much pressure, these farmers, because they don't get so much of the return and the financial benefit from what they grow because so many other people have a slice of the pie that they need to produce copious amounts and they need to find a way to do that. And unfortunately, the quality of the food has suffered as a result, and it doesn't need to be like that.
No, that's correct. And just simple things of like community swap of veggies. If you're good at growing, say, pumpkins, grow them. Grow lots of them. And then share them with someone that's good at growing herbs. Because everybody has their own unique space, their own unique talent, and they might just like having a little herb garden at their back door. That might be all they have. But grow lots of them. Grow more than you can eat, and then find somewhere you can swap. It's starting to happen. And people that join those kind of communities are getting a lot of reward, a lot of feedback, like, oh, wow, you grew some really nice pumpkins last year, I want some more next year. And it disempowers the powers that are driving our food production to extinction. It's come back to empowering individuals to do just a little bit. You don't need to go out and plant a great veggie patch and overwhelm yourself, but plant one thing, just something this week, and then see the reward down the track, and then go, oh, I think I could do 2 things. And just step by step, take back some control of your nutrient and your food supply that's going to feed your body.
Well, yeah, even if you live in an apartment and you've got no outside, I used to be this person. I used to grow herbs in pots. on my windowsill. And, you know, it sounds simple, but it is, you know,
Yeah.
and you can get little pots, you can get them already in a pot, already planted, but, you know, you can get really cheap, nice looking terracotta pots that they don't cost a lot, and, you know, they can even make your kitchen look nice because it adds a bit of greenery, and, you know, it's so simple, it's such a simple concept, but we just have to take 5 minutes to plant them. That's all it takes, because we live in such a go, 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 fast-paced world that people, you know, their first response is, oh, I don't have time for that. Well, if you don't have time for that, get your kids to do it. Or, you know, get your friends to do it, or find out, like what you said with the co-ops. You know, there is one that I know of, but there's plenty more out there I know. But the one I do know of is in Carlton or Collingwood, one of the two,
Yeah.
or North Melbourne, I think. Anyway, and they there's about 5 different families. They all grow one thing, like you said, and they all every week gather together and they swap all their different produce, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And then there is another one that I know of, actually, I lie, that there's a couple of local farmers that don't have a lot of room. They just have a backyard, but they grow 3 or 4 things each. They take it to like an organic swap kind of co-op type scenario, and everybody pays $10. They take along a box and they get, you know, the 5 things or the 6 things. Now, if they don't want one of those things, they can swap it out and put something else in the box instead. So, you know, as long as you've filled up your box for your $10, it doesn't really matter what you take. So it's just an incredible concept because it's so fresh, it's so cheap, and it's real food, and you know it's grown fresh and local, so you know where it comes from.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that is on a ever increasing rise of communities getting together, producing what they can with where they are to actually get on the path to actually give their body what it needs. It's sad when people say they don't have time to stop and grow something that will give them nutrient. They're prepared to spend the money to take some kind of a medication or some kind of problem.
Yes. Oh,
They're prepared to sit in, you know, a doctor's waiting room because they've
yeah,
got illness, but they're not prepared to do the very thing that could prevent it. So, you know,
correct.
I say if you haven't got the time, and people say, oh, well, I can't afford to eat organic. If you time poor and you haven't got the money, you can't afford to be sick. So you need to take the prevention, and it's about putting real food back into your diet instead of
Yep.
this processed garbage that is food-like products. And that can be just your broccoli you're buying off the shelf. It could be a food-like product. It looks like broccoli, but it needs an ingredient list of what's in it.
It's so true, Jace, you know, and God, it's it's sometimes even as easy as getting it delivered to your door. I mean, there's so many organic farmers out there that have got, you know, Farmers Direct, where they'll deliver it to your door. So really, there's no excuse. It's not that much difference in price to the supermarket. In fact, sometimes it's cheaper. You don't even have to go and get it. So if you put a price on your time and your hourly rate of what you would charge your time at, and adding to the mix the fuel and the fact that you actually have to go and take time out to go and get it from the supermarket, really, it's the same price if not cheaper, and it's better for you.
Absolutely. It's just a paradigm shift, is all it is, of where you're going, where you're used to habitually getting your food. You need to just make a shift and your whole world could shift, because as you feed your body the right way, then things change. I know things change. Like your thinking
Well, you're
changes.
living proof.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. So I just encourage people to take control of where their food's coming from. That will eventually, as a wave, change the way food is produced.
Mm.
Um, I'm ready to educate farmers, but they're not ready to be educated while consumers keep pushing the button of what they want. It's, until they change what they actually want, what they're looking for, then farming will follow suit. So we need to change
Well,
the
it's
consumer.
been, yeah, change the habits of the consumers.
Yeah.
So it's been really insightful tonight, Jason. You know, it always is with you. We are going to delve deeper into why food is a toxic supply from certain suppliers, and what goes into the production of food, not just on the level we've spoken about tonight, but you know, also too into the toxicity of our food. And I'm really excited to continue on this journey and to do our 8-week series, because I could talk for hours on this stuff, and you know, every time we talk about a topic, a million light bulbs are going off in my head of all the questions I want to ask you, and you know, and it's generally something that leads to a completely other new can of worms that, you know, obviously we don't have time for in one session. So what is it that we're going to be covering next week?
Next week, I want to cover a little bit more on organic food and why it's different. I know we've touched on it briefly tonight, but I want people to understand why it is not an option; it's a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's a really simple analogy, I guess, of where you spend your dollar, you're voting. So we'll go into that.
Wow.
You're voting with your dollar every time you buy something of what this world is going to be like in the very short term future. So as we keep voting in a certain direction, it keeps predicting what the future is going to be in food production.
That's very political, but very true. I love it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's only tonight I saw on the news, I was just downstairs, and I don't very, 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 very rarely will I ever watch the news, because I think it's very biased and oftentimes full of a lot of garbage that you don't really need to know. You know, I'd prefer to keep my head in a positive frame. But there was one thing about the rise of diabetes, and having just gone through healing myself of some pretty chronic symptoms, all because of adrenal burnout, and I personally have traced it back to the copious amounts of coffee that I was drinking, and I actually call it, even though I love it, I call it coffee the devil, because of what it did to my body, and it actually threw out so much of my body's own way of its mechanics and the way it works, to the point where my insulin levels were all up the creek without a paddle. And I raise this point because with filling your body full of empty, deficient, nutrient deficient food, humans have this need for stimulus and for stimulant products, and you know, even something as simple as coffee, and the adverse effect that these stimulants have on the body is just chronic, and it starts this cycle of you know, needing that instant gratification from a stimulant, all because we don't eat food that's going to supply us with enough energy, boundless amounts of energy for that day, you know. And because we are eating empty food, we have to get that lift and that energy source from somewhere else. And you know, there are so many people that reach for the sugar, or reach for the quick fix, or reach for the coffee, and you know, and I think there's so many things that can be ruled out, so many illnesses and so many ailments just by changing your diet. You know, and I know myself from changing from coffee to green juices, and you know, I had the occasional green tea now, but I don't have a spiked life where, you know, I'm pinging 1 minute and then crashing and burning the next, you know. And I think, again, here we go, that's a topic for a whole nother day. But it just rolled on, segued nicely from what you were saying about you know, not having the need for certain things in your life because you just go back to basics.
Yeah, that's right. And if you fuel your body the right way, as you're saying, you don't need stimulants to exist. You just you have this natural glow, this natural energy that just bubbles and flows because you're getting source. And I totally believe that coffee is a superfood, and it's for use as needed, not as dependent. There's a shift there. Coffee is a superfood, and it's actually good for you in measured amounts at the right time. If you need the adrenaline, or you need the boost to go, and do a massive push of workout or something, utilize it as a superfood, but don't get hooked on just depending on that to give you what your body needs. Your body needs nutrient. It doesn't need coffee and sugar. It needs a lot more than. So yeah, good point.
Well, Jace, I think that's all we have time for, because speaking of food, I have an amazing dinner that's being made for me downstairs, so I better go. But I want to thank you immensely again for tonight, for the first kickoff episode in a series of 8, 7 more to come. And I've had such amazing feedback on the last interview that we did together, and I no doubt, I don't have a shadow of a doubt in my mind that this is going to be invaluable for so many people. So I really do appreciate you giving up your time tonight, because I know that you're busy and you've got your own family to attend to as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Em. I do have my family to attend to. It's my son's 2nd birthday today, and I've got a birthday dinner. Yeah.
Oh, happy birthday to him. I'm so sorry, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and Josiah is 2 today, so yeah, must get better. And yeah, thank you, Em.
No worries. I look forward to next week, and you have a great night. And to everyone out there watching, eat as cleanly as you can.
Yeah, well said. Cheers. Until next time.
Till next time, till next week. Same time next week. And if you want to catch the replay, www.empowerutv.com. And you can also jump on our Facebook page, which is /EmpowerU. And Jace, I believe you've got a Facebook page too. What is it?
I have my own personal one, which is just Jason Fulston, family stuff. My page, Food Revulsion to Revolution. Food Revulsion to Revolution. So I always post, and yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, you have a fantastic week, and keep kicking butt, and I look forward to next Tuesday night, same time, for our next instalment.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jace. Catch ya.